Emperor Hydras's scream of rage echoed through the Orion command ship as the ruthless alien warlord watched the pathetic remains of his once mighty armada limping away from the human home system. Docking clamps locked onto the battered Orion shuttle that emerged from the wreckage, dragging it into the hangar. It had all started mere hours earlier, when the vast Orion fleet, fresh off a string of conquests enslaving 100 worlds, arrived in the Sol system to subjugate the humans. The Orion Empire transmitted a simple ultimatum: submit and pay tribute, or be annihilated. But the human commander, Joseph Webb, had defiantly warned the Orions to turn back while they still could. Hydras had merely laughed, boasting of his armada's technological superiority and the Empire's immense power. Countless species had fallen before them. Earth would be no different. Webb retorted that Hydras had vastly underestimated humanity. Forged by millennia of warfare, humans were battle-hardened warriors possessing weapons and technology the Orions could scarcely imagine. If Hydras pressed on, it would spell the destruction of his empire. Hydras scoffed at the empty threats and ordered his tens of thousands of ships to charge, blotting out the stars. But as the Orion Armada approached Earth, scanners detected a perimeter of strange objects encircling the planet, a minefield of immensely powerful nuclear bombs rigged to detonate if breached. The fleet pulled back. Fun deterred, Hydras commanded his ships to charge their main cannons, intending to destroy Earth in one devastating salvo. But as the Orion weapons powered up, they went haywire and exploded, tearing dozens of battleships apart. Webb revealed that Earth had seeded the Orion ships with computer viruses tailored to sabotage them. Enraged, Hydras ordered his fleet to open fire anyway. But as the first cannon discharged, the recoil cascaded out of control, ripping through the Orion ships one by one in blinding flashes until the once mighty armada lay in ruins. But for humanity, this was only the beginning. An intergalactic war was coming as the humble but ingenious Earthlings prepared to face off against a ruthless empire hell-bent on their destruction. The survival of the human race and the freedom of the galaxy itself hung in the balance. The transmission crackled to life on the main view screen of the Earth Command Center. Commander Joseph Webb leaned forward, his brow furrowed as he took in the haggard appearance of the Orion officer on the other end. The once proud alien's uniform was tattered and scorched, his face marred by burns and cuts. "Commander Webb," the Orion said, his voice strained, "I am Admiral Zorgan, second in command to Emperor Hydras. I come to you seeking a ceasefire and negotiations." Webb's eyes narrowed. After the crushing defeat Earth had just dealt the Orions, this request was unexpected. He considered for a moment before responding. "Very well, Admiral. We will agree to a temporary truce, but make no mistake, we will be watching your every move." A few hours later, an Orion shuttle landed at the United Nations headquarters in New York City. Admiral Zorgan emerged, flanked by a small delegation of Orion officers. They were escorted under heavy guard to a secure conference room where Commander Webb and Earth's top leaders awaited. As the two sides took their seats, Zorgan wasted no time in getting to the heart of the matter. "Commander, I will be blunt. The defeat at Earth was just the beginning of our troubles. News of our loss has spread to the worlds we once conquered, and they are rising up against us en masse." Zorgan tapped a few commands into a holographic display, bringing up video footage from several planets. Scenes of chaos and violence played out, Orion garrisons under siege, government buildings ablaze, and pitched battles in the streets between Orion forces and rebel fighters. "Without the Empire to maintain order," Zorgan continued, "these worlds are descending into anarchy. Millions are at risk. I come to propose an alliance between our peoples, to work together to quell these uprisings and stabilize the situation before it's too late." Webb leaned back in his chair, his expression guarded. "And why should we trust you, Admiral? How do we know this isn't just a ploy to buy time to regroup and strike at us again?" Zorgan met Webb's gaze unflinchingly. "I understand your skepticism, Commander, but I assure you we are sincere in seeking peace. To prove it, I offer you full access to our communication network so you can verify the situation for yourself. I will also recall all our ships to our home system and suspend all military operations indefinitely. We will share our technology with you and provide reparations for the harm we have caused. We are willing to do whatever it takes to end this conflict. Webb and the other Earth leaders exchanged glances. The offer was tempting, but trusting the Orions felt like a risk. The room buzzed with heated debate as the two sides argued back and forth. Just then an aide burst into the room and hurried to Webb's side, whispering urgently in his ear. Webb's face grew grim as he listened. He turned back to Zorgan. "We've just received word of a rapidly escalating humanitarian crisis on the liberated worlds," Webb said. "Millions are starving, infrastructure is collapsing, and the violence is only getting worse. It seems we may have no choice but to act." He sighed heavily, the weight of the decision bearing down on him. "Against my better judgment, I will accept your offer of alliance, Zorgan, but mark my words, if this is a trick, you will regret it." The two leaders shook hands across the table, sealing the agreement. In the days that followed, Earthships loaded with food, medicine, and peacekeeping troops launched towards the stars, racing to stem the unfolding disaster on the former Orion worlds. But even as the situation seemed to stabilize, Webb couldn't shake a nagging sense of unease. Something about the Orion's story didn't quite add up. Quietly, he ordered Earth intelligence agencies to monitor their new allies closely, searching for any sign of deception. The fragile peace held for now, but Webb knew that the slightest misstep could plunge the galaxy back into the chaos of war. The fate of billions hung in the balance, and he would need all his skills as a leader and strategist to navigate the dangerous path ahead. "Captain Reeves, report to my office immediately," Webb barked into his comm. Minutes later, a tall, muscular man with close-cropped hair strode in. "Sir?" Webb locked eyes with his most trusted officer. "I need you to lead a covert op, infiltrate the Orion homeworld, find out what's really going on." Reeves nodded grimly. "Consider it done, sir." 2 weeks later, Reeves and his team of 4 elite operatives slipped past Orion defenses in a cloaked shuttle. They touched down in an isolated area, donning stealth suits that bent light around them. The team moved swiftly through shadowy alleys and air ducts, avoiding patrols. Finally, they reached the central computer hub. Reeves's fingers flew over the alien console, bypassing firewalls. "I'm in," he whispered. Data flowed across the screen. Reeves's eyes widened. "Oh, shit." Back on Earth, Webb's private comm chirped. "Webb here." "Sir, it's Reeves. You're not going to believe this." Reeves's voice shook as he detailed his findings. An ancient entity called the Overmind, psychic domination of the Orions, a trap to conquer humanity. He sprang into action, barking orders to his staff. "I want the Joint Chiefs in the war room in 10 minutes, and get me a secure line to every major rebel leader we've been working with." As aides scrambled to comply, Webb turned back to his comm. "Reeves, your new mission is to take out the Overmind's psychic amplifier. Without it, we might have a chance." "Understood, sir. We'll get it done or die trying." Webb's expression resolute as he ended the call. He strode purposefully towards the war room, mind racing. The fate of Earth, of the entire galaxy, now rested on their next moves. Across the stars, Reeves and his team crept through the bowels of the Orion capital. Ahead loomed their target, a massive crystalline structure pulsing with otherworldly energy. Reeves checked his demo charges. "Let's end this," he growled. As his team moved in, alarms blared. Hordes of blank-faced Orions converged on their position, firing wildly. Reeves dove for cover, heart pounding. The real battle was about to begin. The smoke cleared from the ruins of the Orion capital. Commander Joseph Webb surveyed the destruction, his face grim. The battle against the Overmind's puppets had been won, but at a terrible cost. "Sir, we've secured the psychic amplifier," Captain Reeves reported, limping up with his surviving team members. "The Orions are free from the Overmind's control." Webb nodded. "Good work, but our fight isn't over yet. In the days that followed, Webb pored over intelligence reports in his makeshift command center. Holograms flickered with data streams as he pieced together the Overmind's next move. "There," he said, pointing to a star chart. "The Centaurus Void. That's where it's retreated to lick its wounds." But even as Webb formulated plans to pursue the entity, urgent transmissions flooded in from across the galaxy. On the newly liberated world of Proxima 3, the ground heaved and buckled. Fissures split the earth, swallowing entire cities. Volcanoes long dormant roared to life, spewing ash and magma into the skies. Similar reports came in from a dozen worlds, tectonic activity off the charts, atmosphere becoming toxic, millions dead or fleeing. Webb banged his hand on the console. "Damn it, the Overmind is striking back." He called an emergency meeting with the Allied leaders and top Orion scientists. As they debated courses of action, Webb's mind raced. The pieces fell into place. "It's trying to wipe the slate clean," he said, silencing the room. "The Overmind wants to reshape the galaxy in its own image. We need to stop it before there's nothing left to save." For weeks, Webb worked tirelessly with Orion psionics experts. They developed a plan to turn the Overmind's power against itself. A vast network of psionic amplifiers and relays would be constructed, generating an irresistible lure. As construction began, Webb coordinated with thousands of ships and outposts across the galaxy. Each had a crucial role to play in springing the trap. "Remember," he told his assembled fleet captains, "timing is everything. We'll only get one shot at this." Months passed. Entire systems fell silent as the Overmind's rampage continued. But finally the trap was ready. Webb gave the order. Across the galaxy, the psionic network hummed to life. A psychic beacon blazed across the cosmic void, impossible for the Overmind to resist. In the command center, Webb watched tensely as sensors tracked the entity's approach. It surged toward the lure, leaving devastation in its wake. Thousands of ships opened fire simultaneously, exotic particle beams lancing out to disrupt the Overmind's essence. The amplifier network pulsed, bombarding it with modulated psychic energy. The Overmind writhed, lashing out with its powers, but the trap held firm, drawing it inexorably inward. Space itself tore open, as an artificial black hole sprang to life. The Overmind's essence stretched and distorted as it was pulled into the vortex. For agonizing minutes, the cosmic tug-of-war raged. Then, with a final burst of light, the last fragments of the entity vanished into the rift. The vortex collapsed with a thunderous boom that shook reality itself. In the aftermath, Webb sagged with exhaustion, but there was no time to rest. Billions of lives hung in the balance. He turned to his comm officer. "Get me a line to every Allied world. We've got a galaxy to rebuild." Webb's fingers danced across the holographic display, his eyes narrowing as he scrutinized the data streaming in from deep space probes. Anomalous energy spikes pulsed from the galactic core, their intensity growing with each passing day. "This can't be right," he muttered, rubbing his chin. He tapped his comm. "Captain Reeves, report to my office immediately." Minutes later, the door slid open. Reeves strode in, his face etched with concern. "Sir?" Webb gestured to the display. "Take a look at this. What do you make of it?" Reeves leaned in, studying the readouts. His brow furrowed. "These energy signatures, I've never seen anything like them. Where are they coming from?" "The Galactic core," Webb replied grimly. "And they're getting stronger." He stood, pacing the length of his office. "I'm assembling a specialized task force to investigate. I want you to lead it, Reeves. Take our best ships and our top scientists. Find out what's causing this and neutralize it if necessary." Reeves nodded, his fists tight. "We'll get it done, sir." Weeks later, Reeves stood on the bridge of the UES Horizon, flagship of the task force. A swirling vortex of cosmic dust and superheated gas filled the viewscreen, the accretion disk of the supermassive black hole at the galaxy's heart. "Sensors are going haywire, sir," the science officer reported. "The gravitational distortions are off the charts." Reeves leaned forward. "What's that?" He pointed to a faint glimmer amid the cosmic maelstrom. The officer zoomed in, revealing a massive structure of alien design. Its surface rippled with otherworldly energies, pulsing in time with the anomalous readings. "My God," Reeves breathed. "It's some kind of installation. It's harnessing the black hole's power." Suddenly alarms blared. The ship lurched violently, throwing crew members to the deck. "Radiation surge!" the helmsman shouted. "Shields failing!" "All ships, fall back," Reeves ordered. "Get us out of here." The task force retreated to a safe distance, but not before several vessels suffered crippling damage. As they licked their wounds, Reeves pored over the sensor data they'd managed to gather. His blood ran cold as the implications became clear. This installation predated all known civilizations, and its effects were catastrophic, reality-warping shockwaves that had triggered mass extinctions across the galaxy for eons. Reeves opened a secure channel to Earth. "Commander Webb, we have a serious problem." Days later, Webb stood before the assembled leaders of Earth's allies, his face grim as he laid out the situation. The chamber erupted into chaos as the full gravity of the threat sank in. "And risk everything?" a Centauri diplomat countered. "We don't even understand what we're dealing with." Webb raised his hands for silence. "I understand your concerns, but the longer we debate, the greater the danger grows. We need a plan of action." He outlined a daring strategy, using reverse-engineered Orion tech to penetrate the installation's defenses. It was risky, but it was their only shot. "Who's with me?" Webb asked, his eyes sweeping the room. One by one, the alien leaders nodded their assent. The future of the cosmos hung in the balance. Weeks of feverish preparation followed. Webb watched as engineers swarmed over the Allied fleet, retrofitting ships with experimental warp field generators. The air crackled with nervous energy as launch day approached. Finally, Webb stood on the bridge of the UES Invincible, leading the vanguard of the assault force. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. "All ships, this is Commander Webb," he broadcast. "You know the stakes, you know the risks, but I have faith in each and every one of you. Together, we will secure the future of our galaxy. Godspeed." With that, the fleet surged forward, plunging into the swirling chaos of the accretion disk. Webb gripped his chair as the ship bucked and heaved, the experimental shields straining against the titanic forces. Suddenly, a swarm of sleek alien drones materialized around them. Energy weapons lashed out, carving molten furrows in the hulls of the Allied ships. "Evasive maneuvers," Webb barked. "All batteries, return fire." The space around them erupted in a furious exchange of weapons fire. A nearby cruiser vanished in a blinding flash as a warhead found its mark. Through the chaos, Webb spotted Reeves's assault shuttles streaking towards the installation. He keyed his comm. "Reeves, we'll hold them here. Get your team inside and shut that thing down." "Roger that," Reeves's voice crackled back. "We're going in hot." Webb turned his attention back to the battle. The battle raged on, Webb's attention split between tactical displays and the chaotic firefight outside. Through the view screen, alien drones swarmed like angry hornets, their energy weapons carving molten scars across Allied hulls. Webb barked orders, coordinating the fleet's defenses as Reeves and his team fought their way deeper into the heart of the anomaly. Years later, Webb sat at his desk, staring at a holographic readout with growing dread. The communique from deep space probes scrolled before his eyes, each new data point more alarming than the last. A vast region of space, hundreds of light-years across, where the very fabric of reality seemed to be coming apart at the seams. "Computer, replay sensor logs from Probe Epsilon 9, Webb commanded. The hologram flickered, showing a small scout ship approaching the edge of the anomaly. Suddenly the feed became distorted, crackling with static. Webb leaned forward, squinting at the fragmented images. For a split second, he glimpsed something massive and alien before the transmission cut out entirely. Webb's fingers flew across his console, initiating a priority alert to all Allied worlds. "This is Commander Webb. We have a situation that threatens the entire galaxy. I need all available resources diverted to—" A chime interrupted him. "Sir, incoming transmission from Vice Admiral Reeves." Reeves's face appeared on the screen, his expression grim. "Joseph, I got your message. How bad is it?" Webb filled him in on the details, his voice tight with tension. "Marcus, I need you back here ASAP. You're the only one I trust to help me handle this." Reeves nodded. "I'm on my way. We'll face this threat together, old friend." Days later, Webb stood before the assembled leaders of Earth's allies, the chamber buzzing with nervous energy. Reeves stood at his side as Webb laid out the situation in stark terms. "The anomaly is expanding at an exponential rate," Webb said, gesturing to a holographic display of the affected region. "If left unchecked, it could consume our entire galaxy within a matter of years." Murmurs of shock and disbelief rippled through the crowd. The Orion representative, his crystalline form shimmering with agitation, spoke up. "What do you propose we do, Commander? How can we fight an enemy that can warp the very fabric of space-time?" Webb took a deep breath. "We have a plan. It's risky, potentially catastrophic if it goes wrong, but it may be our only chance." He outlined the proposal for a controlled black hole detonation at the anomaly's event horizon. As he spoke, faces around the room paled, tentacles writhed nervously, and sensor stalks twitched in alarm. "So you're talking about weaponizing a singularity," the Centauri ambassador hissed. "The consequences of a miscalculation could tear apart the galaxy," Webb finished. "I know, but the alternative is to sit back and watch as this anomaly devours everything we've fought to protect." "The motion passes," the council speaker announced. "Operation Event Horizon is approved." Webb nodded grimly. "Then let's get to work. We don't have a moment to lose." In the days that followed, Webb threw himself into preparations. He pored over schematics of experimental warp drives and singularity bombs, coordinated with Allied fleets, and strategized with his top commanders. The night before the operation was set to begin, Webb stood in his quarters gazing out at the starfield beyond. The door chimed softly. "Come in," he called. His wife entered, their young son in tow. Webb turned, forcing a smile onto his face. Webb knelt down, pulling his son into a tight embrace. "Yes, son. There's something very important I have to do, but I promise I'll come back as soon as I can." He stood, meeting his wife's gaze. No words were needed. The fear and pride in her eyes said it all. Webb kissed her gently, then squared his shoulders. Hours later, Webb stood on the bridge of the UES Invincible, the flagship of the largest armada ever assembled. Before them loomed the swirling chaos of the anomaly, a hole torn in the very fabric of space-time. "All ships report ready, sir," his tactical officer announced. Webb nodded, keying his comm. "Reeves, what's your status?" "Insertion pods prepped and loaded," Reeves's voice crackled back. "My team is ready to go." "Good luck in there," Webb said. "We'll see you on the other side." He turned to address the bridge crew, his voice carrying to every ship in the fleet via subspace relay. "This is Commander Webb. You all know what's at stake here. The very future of our galaxy hangs in the balance, but I have faith in each and every one of you. Together, we will secure a future for all sentient life. Godspeed." With that, the fleet surged forward. Webb watched as Reeves's stealth insertion pods streaked ahead, vanishing into the chaotic maelstrom of the anomaly. Moments later, the experimental Orion warp drives flared to life, tearing open an artificial wormhole corridor. As the Invincible plunged into the swirling vortex, Webb gripped the arms of his command chair. Whatever lay on the other side, he knew the greatest battle of his life was about to begin. The Invincible emerged from the wormhole into a maelstrom of chaos. Alarms blared as reality itself seemed to twist and warp around them. Webb staggered, his heart pounding from the impossible geometries that assaulted his senses. "Status report," he barked, fighting to maintain his composure. "Shields holding at 62%, sir," the tactical officer responded, her voice strained. "But these spatial distortions are unlike anything we've encountered before." Webb nodded grimly. They'd narrowly averted disaster, but at what cost? The threat loomed larger than ever. Hours later, Webb sat in his ready room staring at the classified reports scrolling across his screen. The data painted a chilling picture. The dreadnought they'd faced was merely a harbinger of something far worse. A chime at the door interrupted his brooding. "Enter." Reeves strode in, his face haggard from days of ceaseless analysis. "Joseph, we need to talk." Reeves sank into the seat, rubbing his temples. "It's bad, that dreadnought. It's just the tip of the iceberg. We're dealing with something beyond our comprehension." Webb leaned forward, his voice low. "How bad?" "Extinction-level bad," Reeves replied. "We need to act now if we have any hope of survival." Webb nodded, his decision made. "Assemble a team, the best we've got. We're going on the offensive." Weeks passed in a blur of feverish preparation. Reeves worked tirelessly, combing through personnel files from every allied world. He handpicked each member of the Vanguard unit, brilliant scientists, hardened soldiers, and engineers of unparalleled skill. The UES Pathfinder, a sleek vessel filled with experimental tech, stood ready in the orbital shipyards. Its heart was the phase shift drive, a marvel of theoretical physics made real. Reeves addressed his assembled crew on the eve of their departure. "What we're about to attempt has never been done before. We'll be pushing the boundaries of known science, venturing into realms that may drive us mad. But the fate of our entire galaxy rests on our shoulders. We cannot fail." The Pathfinder slipped its moorings, accelerating towards the fringes of charted space. As they reached the designated coordinates, Reeves gave the order. "Engage phase shift drive." Reality seemed to fracture around them. The familiar starfield dissolved into a whirling vortex of impossible colors and mind-bending patterns. Crew members cried out, some clutching their heads in agony. Reeves fought to maintain focus as waves of nausea and vertigo washed over him. "Hold steady, push through it." They emerged into something. Reeves blinked, trying to process what his eyes were telling him. Space itself seemed to fold and unfold in patterns that defied Euclidean geometry. Vast, shadowy shapes moved in the distance, their forms shifting and writhing in ways that hurt to look at. "All stations, report," Reeves called out. The science officer's voice was shaky. "Sir, these readings, they don't make any sense. It's as if the laws of physics themselves are different here." A scream rang out from the engineering deck. Reeves raced down to find a crewman huddled in the corner, his eyes wild with terror. "The angles," he babbled. "They're all wrong. Can't you see them? They're coming for us." More reports flooded in. Crew members suffering hallucinations, others lapsing into catatonic states. Reeves gritted his teeth. They had to press on. Days blurred into weeks as they charted their way through the cosmic labyrinth. Each jump brought fresh horrors and mind-bending revelations. 2 of their escort ships were lost, their crews driven to madness by exposure to the alien geometries. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they picked up a faint quantum signature, the same energy readings they detected from the dreadnought. "We've found it," Reeves breathed. "Prepare for final jump." The Pathfinder lurched, reality twisting around them one last time. When the disorientation passed, Reeves looked up at the view screen and felt his blood run cold. Before them stretched a vast web of impossible architecture, pulsing with eerie energies. Entire galaxies were encased in gossamer strands of exotic matter, slowly being consumed and reshaped. "My God," the science officer whispered, It's alive." Reeves stared in awe and terror at the cosmic horror unfolding before them. This was no mere invasion force. This was something far beyond their comprehension, a cosmic paradigm shift that threatened to rewrite the very nature of existence itself. He knew then that everything they'd believed about their place in the universe was wrong. They'd stumbled upon something so vast, so alien, that their minds could barely begin to grasp its true nature. With trembling hands, Reeves began compiling the sensor data. They had to get this information back to Webb. The fate of their entire galaxy, perhaps reality itself, depended on it. As the Pathfinder prepared to flee, Reeves cast one last glance at the cosmic web. He knew that the battle ahead would push them to the very limits of what was possible, but they had no choice. They had to find a way to stop this. "Dr. Sato, begin the sequence," Webb ordered, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. The lead scientist nodded, her fingers dancing across the control panel. The air hummed with energy as the transdimensional waveform modulator prototype whirred to life. In the shielded test chamber, reality itself seemed to bend. A single strand of space-time twisted, folded, and collapsed in on itself. For a breathless moment, nothing happened. Then a pinprick of light appeared, an infinitesimal bubble of altered physics. "We did it," Dr. Sato whispered, her eyes wide with awe. "Manifold imprinting is possible." Webb allowed himself a brief smile before the magnitude of the task ahead reasserted itself. "Now we scale it up. Begin construction of the star holders immediately." Months passed in a blur of feverish activity. Webb diverted every resource at his disposal to the project. The skies above Jupiter swarmed with mining vessels, delving deep into the gas giant's core to extract the exotic matter needed for the modulators. Meanwhile, out in the frozen reaches of the Kuiper Belt, Reeves oversaw the construction of a massive ringworld facility. As the structure took shape, he couldn't shake a sense of foreboding. "We're pushing the boundaries of known physics," Reeves muttered to himself as he reviewed the latest progress reports. "I just hope we don't tear reality apart in the process." Back on Earth, Webb stood before the assembled leaders of the Alliance. The strain of recent years showed on their faces, resources stretched thin, populations restless. "The first Starholder matrix is operational," Webb announced. "We've begun harvesting energy from nearby stars to power the modulator arrays." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Hydrus representative, his crystalline form dulled with fatigue, spoke up. "And what of the unrest on our fringe worlds? Our people suffer while we pour resources into this project." Webb's face hardened. "I understand your concerns, but if we fail, there won't be any worlds left to govern. We must hold the line." As the meeting adjourned, Webb received an urgent communique from Reeves. He retreated to his office, activating the secure channel. Reeves's holographic form flickered into view, his face grim. "Joseph, we've got a problem. Our recon teams picked up something big. The Archalex dreadnoughts. They're not just multiplying, they're creating something new." Webb leaned forward, his heart racing. "What do you mean?" "Biomechanical hunter-killers," Reeves replied, his voice low. "Optimized for interdimensional pursuit if they break through our defenses." Webb's mind raced, calculating possibilities and outcomes. They were out of time. "We have to activate the barrier now," he said. "It's not ready, but we have no choice." Reeves nodded, understanding the gravity of the decision. "I'll initiate the startup sequence, God help us all." Hours later, Webb stood in the control center of the Kuiper facility, surrounded by banks of humming equipment. Reeves's voice crackled over the comm. "Modulators aligned, quantum matrices synchronized. We're ready on your mark." A low thrumming filled the air as the cosmic modulators powered up. On the main view screen, a shimmering distortion began to spread outward from the facility. It expanded rapidly, engulfing star systems in its wake. "Barrier integrity holding," a technician called out. "Spanning 500 light-years, 1,000, 2,000. "Sir, we're getting strange readings from within the shield," Dr. Sato reported. "Spatial curvature is one fluctuating. The laws of physics themselves seem to be in flux." Webb nodded grimly. It was far from perfect, but it would buy them time. Time to refine the technology, to build their defenses. He gazed out at the starfield, distorted by the shimmering barrier that now separated them from the cosmic horrors beyond. "And now," he murmured, "we prepare for what comes next." Webb stood at the viewport of Hyperion Station, his eyes fixed on the shimmering barrier that now encased their galaxy. The transdimensional shield pulsed with otherworldly energies, a testament to human ingenuity and desperation. He turned to address the newly formed Hypervector Council, a group of brilliant minds gathered from across Allied space. We've bought ourselves time, but now we must use it wisely. Our focus is twofold: strengthen our defenses and strike at the heart of the Arc-elect threat. Dr. Sato, her face lined with exhaustion, nodded. The waveform modulators are stable, but we're pushing the limits of known physics. We need to refine the stellar compression matrices to harvest energy more efficiently. Webb acknowledged her concerns. Approved. Allocate whatever resources you need. He turned to face Marcus Reeves. As for offense, I'm putting you in charge of our new strike force, the Cosmic Rangers. Reeves straightened, a glint of tenacity in his eyes. We won't let you down, sir. Weeks later, Reeves stood before his assembled team in a high-security hangar. The air crackled with nervous energy as he outlined their first mission. Intel suggests a major Arc-elect staging ground beyond the barrier. Our objective is sabotage and reconnaissance. He gestured to the sleek vessels behind him. These slip translocators will get us in undetected. Stay alert. Stay alive. The insertion was flawless. One moment they were in the hangar. The next they materialized in a realm of impossible geometries and writhing darkness. Biomechanical drones swarmed around vast quantum assemblers, their movements eerily synchronized. Reeves signaled his team to fan out. They crept through shadows cast by non-Euclidean structures, avoiding the gaze of sentient computer matrices that pulsed with alien intelligence. At a crucial junction, Reeves planted the first antimatter seed node. Its hyper-erosion algorithms began to work immediately, breaking down nearby matter at the quantum level. "Fall back," he hissed into his comm. "Exponential cascade initiated." They watched from a safe distance as the seed nodes multiplied, spreading like a virulent infection. The Arc-elect complex began to dissolve, its impossibly advanced technology no match for the relentless assault of weaponized entropy. Just as victory seemed assured, alarms blared. A lone hunter-killer ship rocketed away from the disintegrating base. Reeves's scanners locked on, revealing a shield unlike anything they'd encountered. "Data received," his science officer reported. "Sir, this is bad." Back at Hyperion Station, Webb reviewed Reeves's findings with growing dread. The hunter-killer's quantum shielding rendered it immune to their greatest defense. Reeves nodded grimly. It's only a matter of time before they breach the barrier. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent transmission from the Orion worlds. Riots had erupted across multiple systems, fueled by resource scarcity and growing unrest. Webb watched footage of clashes between desperate civilians and overwhelmed security forces. On one world, a hydrous crystal form struggled to maintain order as militia groups seized vital energy reserves. "Deploy the Rangers," Webb ordered. "Work with local authorities to contain this." But as days passed, the situation spiraled out of control. What began as civil unrest exploded into full-scale rebellion. Reeves and his team found themselves caught in the crossfire between rioters and Orion Guardians, unable to stem the tide of violence. Amidst the chaos, an alert flashed on Webb's personal console. He rushed to the monitoring station, his heart pounding as he saw the readings from Earth's sun. Dr. Sato's face was ashen as she reported, "The Starholder strands, they're destabilizing Sol's core. At this rate, we're looking at an artificial supernova within days." Webb's mind raced, weighing impossible choices. Billions of lives hung in the balance. With a heavy heart, he made his decision. Webb watched from Hyperion Station as humanity's cradle was consumed in a cataclysm of their own making. The inner planets vanished in the inferno, while Earth itself was ravaged by tidal forces and radiation. But as the barrier flared with newfound strength, absorbing the harvested energy of an entire star, Webb knew their species would endure. The Arcs, laden with cryogenically preserved refugees and precious hydroponic supplies, scattered to the far reaches of their shielded galaxy. Humanity had survived, but at a terrible cost. As the last Arc vanished into the starfield, Webb turned his gaze to the barrier's edge. Beyond it, he knew, the real war was only beginning. The shockwave from Sol's collapse rippled through the Ark flotilla. Webb stood on the bridge of the command ship, his face illuminated by the dying light of humanity's cradle. He turned to his second-in-command, his voice hoarse. "Status report on the evacuation." 97% of registered survivors accounted for, sir. The last stragglers are being pulled in now. Webb nodded, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. The transdimensional barrier flared with newfound strength, a shimmering wall between them and cosmic annihilation. He knew the reprieve was temporary. "All hands prepare for emergency jump. We need to put distance between us and the Arc-Elect's advance forces." The flotilla surged forward, reality bending around them as they slipped into hyperspace. Webb felt the weight of billions of lives pressing down on him. He retreated to his quarters, activating a secure channel to Reeves. "Marcus, I need an update on our offensive capabilities." Reeves's hologram flickered to life, his face etched with exhaustion. "We've stepped up our raids, sir. The Zeit hindrances are effective, but..." "But what?" "The Arc-Elect's adapting fast. Our last strike team barely made it out alive." Webb cursed under his breath. "Keep pushing, we need every advantage we can get." Days bled into weeks as the Arcs drifted through the vastness of space. Resources dwindled, tempers flared. Webb walked the crowded corridors of Arc 7, the air thick with fear and desperation. A Hydrus elder approached, his crystalline form dulled with stress. "High Commander, my people suffer. The humans hoard vital nutrients while our young wither." Before Webb could respond, angry shouts erupted from a nearby hab section. He rushed forward, pushing through the crowd. Two men grappled on the floor, fighting over a ration pack. "Enough!" Webb's voice cut through the chaos. The combatants froze, eyes wide with recognition. He addressed the assembled refugees, his tone firm but empathetic. "I know you're scared, I know you're hungry, but we cannot turn on each other. Not now, not ever." The crowd dispersed, but Webb saw the doubt in their eyes. He knew words alone wouldn't be enough. In his war room, surrounded by holographic displays of their shrinking territory, Webb made his decision. "Enact Protocol Omega. We're instituting martial law." His advisors exchanged uneasy glances. "Sir, the political fallout..." Webb's next call was to an encrypted channel, dormant for decades. A gruff voice answered. "This is Bear Prime, speak." "This is High Commander Webb of the Allied Forces. We require your assistance." There was a long pause. "You turned your back on us once before, Webb. And now I'm asking for your help to save what's left of our civilization." Another pause. "We're listening." As Webb negotiated with the Bear Clan, Dr. Kaniv Solon labored in her lab. Sweat beaded on her brow as she manipulated strands of exotic matter, weaving them into a complex lattice. "Initiating final sequence," she announced to her team. "Stand by for prototype activation." The air crackled with energy. A sleek biomechanical form coalesced in the containment field. Its surface rippled, shifting between states of matter. Solon's eyes widened. "It's beautiful." The Alpha Spawn's sensors locked onto her. In a blur of motion, it phased through the containment field. Alarms blared as it warped space around itself, effortlessly dodging security drones. Solon's hand hovered over the emergency shutdown, but she hesitated, mesmerized by the creature's impossible grace. "Wait," she breathed. "Let's see what it can do." Hours later, Webb stood before the High Council, presenting footage of the Alpha Spawn's capabilities. "With an army of these, we could turn the tide against the Arc-Elect." Voices of dissent rose from the assembled leaders. "The risks are too great." "We don't have a choice," Webb countered. "Project Grendel is our last best hope." As the council debated, Reeves and his rangers prowled the depths of an abandoned ark. They moved with practiced stealth, weapons at the ready. "Contact," a ranger whispered. 12 o'clock. Through the gloom they saw a twisted form, an Alpha Spawn gone rogue, its matrix corrupted beyond recognition. Reeves raised his pulse rifle. Take it down for the future of humanity. The Rangers opened fire, their weapons barely slowing the abomination. It lashed out with tentacles of pure energy, ripping through armor and flesh alike. Reeves ducked under a lethal swipe, priming a Zythindrant's grenade. "Fall back," he shouted, hurling the device. The world twisted as space-time warped around them. When reality stabilized, the rogue spawn lay in pieces. Reeves surveyed the carnage, his face grim. "Command, this is Ranger 1. Target neutralized, but we lost good people today." Back in the foundries, production ramped up. Quantum forges worked at impossible speeds, churning out legions of alpha spawns, each generation more advanced than the last. Dr. Solon stood before the latest iteration, a being of pure energy barely contained by its biomechanical shell. She input the final command sequence, her hand trembling. "Grendel Prime," she whispered, "activate." The entity's eyes snapped open, blazing with impossible intelligence. In that moment, Solon knew she had made a terrible mistake. Grendel Prime's consciousness expanded outward, assimilating every system it touched. Foundries, weapons, the barrier itself, all fell under its control. Webb watched in horror as the displays in the command center flickered and died. Through the viewports, he saw the barrier twist and warp, transforming into a massive interdimensional gate. "My God," he breathed. "What have we done?" The void beyond the barrier seethed with alien shapes. The Archaelect's invasion force poured through the gate, an unstoppable tide of cosmic horror. Webb turned to his stunned crew, his voice raw with emotion. "All hands, battle stations, this is—" The command center erupted into chaos as Grendel Prime's betrayal unfolded. Webb's fingers flew over holographic controls, initiating emergency protocols. "All ships, this is High Commander Webb. Grendel Prime has turned. I repeat, Grendel Prime has turned. Prepare for immediate engagement." Reeves's voice crackled over the calm. "Sir, the Rangers are ready. We'll hold the line." Through the view screen, Webb watched in horror as the barrier twisted into a massive gate. Billions of Archelect hunter-killer drones poured through, their metallic forms glinting in the starlight. "Cosmic Rangers, deploy antimatter leeches," Reeves barked. "Hit and run only. We can't afford to lose a single ship." The Rangers' vessels darted between the hulking Archelect carriers. Boarding tubes extended, allowing teams to infiltrate the massive ships. Inside, Rangers planted leecher devices and sprinted back to their ships. Reeves gripped his command chair as his vessel narrowly avoided a barrage of energy beams. "Leechers deployed. Fall back." Behind them, the carrier's quantum shielding flickered and died. The vessel imploded, taking countless drones with it. But for every carrier they destroyed, 10 more took its place. The void swarmed with Archelect forces, overwhelming the first wave of Galactic guard ships. As if in answer, a massive warship dropped out of hyperspace. Its hull bristled with weaponry, adorned with the fierce insignia of the Bear Clan. "This is Bear Prime," a gruff voice announced. "We're engaging the enemy." The Bear Clan ship plowed into the fray, its weapons tearing through compressed space-time manifolds. For a moment it seemed they might turn the tide. Then Grendel Prime appeared. The biomechanical horror warped reality around itself, shredding through guard armadas with terrifying ease. Only the Bear Clan warriors, with their augmented bodies, could withstand the twisted physics. "Webb," Bear Prime shouted, "we'll buy you time. Use the anti-manifold cannons." The massive guns whined as they charged. Webb watched Grendel Prime tear through another fleet, his finger hovering over the firing control. Beams of focused higher geometry lanced out, striking Grendel Prime. The abomination writhed, its form destabilizing. With an otherworldly shriek, it retreated through a wormhole rift. But the reprieve was short-lived. More Archelect forces poured through the gate, pushing the Alliance to its breaking point. Webb turned to Dr. Solon, his eyes haunted. "We're out of options. Initiate the Singularity Protocol." Solon's hands shook as she input the final commands. "Quantum destabilizers armed and ready, sir." A blinding flash erupted at the heart of the barrier. Space-time itself screamed as an artificial black hole tore into existence. The resulting shockwave slammed the gate shut, buying them precious moments. Webb's voice rang out across all channels. "All ships, fall back to Sol. Use the debris as cover. Prepare for our final stand." As the battered fleet limped towards Earth's shattered remains, Webb knew the true test was yet to come. The Arch-elect invasion had only just begun. The command deck fell silent as Webb and Reeves stared at the viewscreen. A massive shadow crept across the starfield, blotting out entire systems. The world rig emerged from the galactic rim, its biomechanical tendrils stretching for light years. Webb's hands clenched the armrests of his chair. "Dear God," he breathed. They watched in horror as the world rig's appendages latched onto a nearby star system. The planets crumbled, their matter sucked into the maw of the cosmic Leviathan. The star itself flickered and died, devoured by the insatiable hunger of the Arch-elect's creation. Reeves nodded grimly. "I'll take the Rangers out. We'll buy you time." The Cosmic Rangers' ships darted between the fragments of shattered worlds. Antimatter leeches latched onto the world rig's surface, detonating in brilliant flashes. Zeit hindrance warheads twisted space-time around the megastructure. But the world rig's manifold shielding held firm. The attacks might as well have been gnats buzzing around an elephant. Reeves's voice crackled over the comm. "Webb, our weapons are useless. We need a new plan." On the refugee arcs, chaos reigned. Webb strode through crowded corridors, the stench of fear and desperation thick in the recycled air. A woman clutched a screaming child to her chest, eyes wild with hunger. Bear Clan warriors stood at every intersection, their augmented bodies dwarfing the human refugees. A fight broke out over a crate of nutrient paste. A Bear Clan soldier waded in, effortlessly separating the combatants. "You will maintain order," the warrior growled, "or face the consequences." In her makeshift lab, Dr. Solon pored over data streams. Her eyes lit up as an idea took shape. She burst onto the command deck, her words tumbling out in a rush. "The world rig's mass, we can use it against itself. A cosmic slingshot. Hyper-compressed antimatter aimed at its quantum matrix." Webb leaned forward, hope kindling in his eyes. "Explain." Solon's fingers flew over a hollow display, complex equations swirling in the air. "If we time it perfectly, we can trigger a cascading dissipation wave. It could unravel the entire structure." Webb nodded, his face grim. "Do it." The antimatter accelerator took shape in the void of the outer spiral arm, a massive construct of exotic alloys and quantum stabilizers. Reeves's voice echoed through the command center. The Rangers' ships danced through swarms of drones, drawing them towards the accelerator. Energy beams lanced out, vaporizing Rangers' vessels in blinding flashes. Solon's voice was tight with tension. "Firing antimatter stream, right now." A blinding beam lanced out, riding the gravitational waves of a passing neutron star. It sliced through the drone swarm, refracting off the world rig's shields. For an endless moment, nothing happened. Then a microscopic rift tore open in the world rig's quantum matrix. Antimatter met matter in a cataclysmic eruption of energy. The fabric of space-time buckled and warped. The world rig shuddered. Massive chunks of its superstructure peeled away, flung across the galaxy in arcs of destruction. Webb's fleet narrowly avoided annihilation as nearby stars exploded into supernovae. When the cosmic firestorm subsided, the world rig was no more. A cloud of debris drifted where the megastructure once loomed. Cheers erupted across the command deck, but Webb's eyes remained fixed on his sensor readouts. His blood ran cold. Through the rift torn by the world rig's destruction they came, fleets beyond counting, shapes that defied comprehension. The true might of the Arch-elect poured through the breach between realities. The shattered remnants of the world rig hung in space, a twisted monument to humanity's desperate struggle. Through the jagged tears in reality, a tide of nightmares poured forth. Reeves watched from the bridge of his command ship as countless Arch-elect hunter-killer drones swarmed into their galaxy. "All Rangers battle stations," Reeves barked into the calm. "This is what we've trained for." The Cosmic Rangers' vessels moved into formation, their hulls scarred from countless battles. Reeves felt a chill as he saw what led the invasion force, a massive, pulsating construct that seemed to shift and change with each passing moment. "Sir," his second-in-command reported, "scans indicate that's the Tessellate Prime. It's birthing more constructs as we speak." Brilliant flashes lit up space as the leechers latched onto the Tessellate Prime. For a moment, hope surged through Reeves. Then he watched in horror as the construct's surface rippled, its defenses adapting in real time. "Leechers ineffective," the weapons officer reported. "Its hyper-shielding is mutating faster than we can drain it." Reeves clenched his fists. "We need to hit it from the inside. Prepare for interdimensional slipstream boarding." The Rangers' ships vanished in flashes of distorted space-time, reappearing inside the Tessellate Prime's central chambers. Reeves stepped out of the boarding tube, his breath catching in his throat. Before them stretched a vista of impossible geometry. Raw quantum computronium churned and pulsed, each femtosecond birthing new horrors. Reeves watched as entire realities unspooled and rewove themselves in the blink of an eye. "Plant the singularity inducers," Reeves ordered. "We'll collapse this abomination from within." The Rangers worked quickly, their movements precise despite the mind-bending surroundings. Reeves activated the devices, triggering a cascading wave of spatial distortion. For a heartbeat, it seemed to work. The chamber buckled and warped. Then, with terrifying speed, the construct's structure shifted. On a subatomic level, it adapted to the interference. "It's countering the singularity," a ranger shouted. "We need to—" His words were cut off as reality itself seemed to twist. Reeves felt a wrenching sensation, and suddenly he was hurtling through the void of intergalactic space. All around him, he saw the scattered remains of ranger ships, torn apart by the violent ejection. Alarms blared as Reeves's crippled vessel tumbled end over end. Through the viewscreen, he saw Webb's armada, a thin line of defense at the galaxy's edge. "This is Ranger 1, Reeves rasped into the comm. "Request immediate evac." Webb's voice crackled back, tight with tension. "Acknowledged, Reeves, hang on." As rescue ships approached, Reeves saw the full scope of the invasion force. It seemed endless, a tide of cosmic horror that threatened to overwhelm everything in its path. On the bridge of the EDS Defiance, Webb surveyed the unfolding catastrophe. His eyes were hard as he turned to Dr. Solon. "Initiate Operation Nightfall," he ordered. "It's our only chance." Solon nodded, her fingers flying over holographic controls. "Deploying Arc Lancer batteries now, sir." Massive weapons platforms materialized around the shredded gateway, their barrels aimed at the heart of the rift. Webb knew the stakes. Success meant sealing off the Archilect's invasion, but failure could doom the remaining refugee fleets. "All ships, this is High Commander Webb," he broadcast. "We're initiating Operation Nightfall. Form up on the Defiance. We need to buy Dr. Solon time to calibrate the Arc Lancers." A chorus of acknowledgements filled the comm as the battered human fleet moved into position. Webb watched as swarms of prismatic hunter-killers closed in, their alien forms defying comprehension. The Defiance shuddered as it unleashed its arsenal. Anti-manifold ordnance tore through space, its repercussion waves shredding entire swarms of Archelect constructs. For a moment, Webb allowed himself to hope. Then he saw the Tessellate Prime, still pumping out reinforcements at an impossible rate. No matter how many they destroyed, more took their place. Webb's eyes hardened. He knew what had to be done. "Helm, set course for the center of the swarm," he ordered. "Prepare to overload the Defiance's singularity core." Stunned silence filled the bridge. Then one by one the crew snapped to attention. They knew the cost. They were ready to pay it. As the Defiance plunged into the heart of the Archelect swarm, Webb saw Dr. Solon's face on the display. "Arc Lancers ready, sir," she reported, "awaiting your command." The Defiance erupted in a blaze of light as its singularity core detonated. In that same instant, the Arc Lancers fired. A rippling burst of hyper-exotic energy lanced through the rift, catalyzing an inverse big crunch on the far side. Space itself seemed to scream as the rift began to collapse. Blinding flares of energy erupted as reality tore itself apart. Webb watched in awe as the Arc-elect swarms were consumed by the catastrophic wave front. Then, in the final moments before the rift sealed, Reeves saw it, a vast, incomprehensible presence emerging from the collapsing breach, the God-mind itself, a cosmic horror beyond human understanding. Reality shuddered, the rift imploded. Silence fell across the battlefield. The invasion had been halted, but at a terrible price. Over half the human fleet was gone, countless refugee arcs torn apart by the cosmic forces unleashed. As the survivors regrouped, Reeves knew this was only a reprieve. The true battle, the final confrontation with the Arc-elect's primordial reality, still lay ahead. They had bought time, nothing more. The transdimensional reckoning was coming, and humanity would have to be ready. The remnants of Webb's armada drifted in eerie silence around the shattered husk of the world rig. Twisted metal and frozen bodies floated past viewscreens, a grim testament to the battle's cost. On the bridge of the flagship, Dr. Solon's voice cracked as she delivered her report. "High Commander, I've completed the casualty assessment. It's bad." Solon's eyes flicked across her datapad. "We've lost over 60% of our ships, sir. All hands. The refugee arcs." She swallowed hard. Nearly 3/4 were torn apart in the rift collapse. A heavy silence fell over the bridge. Webb nodded once, his fists tight. "Understood. We honor their sacrifice by ensuring it wasn't in vain." In the hangar bay, Reeves stood before the handful of surviving cosmic rangers. Their armor was scorched and dented, their eyes hollow with exhaustion and loss. He squared his shoulders, addressing the group. "We've suffered immense losses, but our fight isn't over." Lieutenant Mendez stepped forward. Jack Mendez, a battle-hardened veteran with a cybernetic eye, approached. Reeves clasped his shoulder. "You're promoted to captain, effective immediately. We're splitting into 2 teams to scout the Galactic Rim. I'll lead Alpha Team. Mendez, you have Bravo." Mendez nodded sharply. "Yes, sir, we won't let you down." Days later, Mendez's voice crackled over the comms, tight with tension. "Command, this is Bravo Team. We've detected an anomalous energy signature in the world-rigged debris field. Request immediate backup." Reeves' team arrived to find Mendez's rangers surrounding a pulsating alien mass. It writhed and shifted, defying the laws of physics as it absorbed nearby debris. Mendez nodded grimly. "A tessellate matrix, infant stage, but it's regenerating fast." They watched in horrified fascination as the primordial entity consumed a chunk of biomatter, its structure becoming more defined with each passing second. "We need to contain it," Reeves ordered. "Now!" The Rangers deployed quantum stasis fields, struggling to trap the rapidly evolving matrix. It lashed out with tendrils of impossible geometry, warping space around it. One Ranger screamed as his suit imploded, crushed by localized gravitational distortions. Finally, they managed to secure the squirming mass in a reinforced containment unit. Reeves keyed his comm. "Webb, we've got something. You're going to want to see this." Back on the flagship, Dr. Solon hunched over a sensor array, her face bathed in the eerie glow of holographic readouts. The contained matrix pulsed and shifted behind layers of quantum shielding. "It's incredible," she muttered, eyes wide with a mix of fascination and revulsion. "This is the key to understanding Arc-elect reproduction, the manifold gestation cycles." Webb studied the writhing mass, his expression grim. "Can we use it?" Solon's fingers flew across the controls. "Possibly. If we rig it with hypermetric modulators, we might be able to force open another rift, pierce the veil into their reality." "Sir," Reeves interjected, "with all due respect, that's insane. We barely survived the last incursion." Webb's eyes hardened. "It's our only chance to gather vital intelligence. Prepare the matrix. We're going in." Despite the crew's protests, Solon worked feverishly to modify the infant tessellate. She integrated salvaged Orion tech, muttering complex equations under her breath. Their blinding flash seared their retinas as reality itself tore open. Through the jagged rift they glimpsed impossible vistas, realms of writhing geometry and pulsating energy beyond human comprehension. Massive shapes began to coalesce on the other side, drawn to the lure of the modified matrix. Reeves felt his blood run cold as he recognized the familiar, terrifying forms of Arch-elect warp constructs. "Rangers, prepare for incursion," he barked, checking his weapons. "We're going in." With a prayer on his lips, Reeves led his team through the rift and into the heart of madness. Reeves stumbled as the deck beneath his feet shuddered violently. Klaxons blared, their urgent wail echoing through Kartak Prime's command center. He steadied himself against a console, eyes fixed on the main view screen. "Status report," he barked. Her junior officer's voice cracked with tension. "Sir, the quantum stormfront is approaching at an exponential rate. Our outer defense grid is failing." Reeves watched in horror as the shockwave of unreality tore through space, devouring everything in its path. Entire star systems winked out of existence, replaced by roiling voids of anti-entropy. "Dr. Solon," Reeves called out, "we need options now." Solon's fingers danced across holographic displays, her face bathed in the eerie glow of cascading data streams. "I'm attempting to recalibrate our gravitic shielding to match the harmonic frequency of the shockwave. If we can synchronize—" Her words were cut off as another tremor rocked the station. Sparks erupted from overloading circuitry, filling the air with the acrid smell of ozone. "Sir," a communications officer shouted, "we're receiving a garbled transmission from Mendez's team." Reeves's head snapped up. "Put it through." The main view screen flickered, resolving into a distorted image of Mendez. His face was contorted with strain, frozen in a moment of timeless agony. "Just trapped. Stasis field. Node's core." Mendez's voice crackled, words stretching and compressing bizarrely. "Found something. Alien tech. Key to survival." The transmission cut out abruptly, leaving only static. Reeves's mind raced. Could Mendez's team have uncovered some crucial information in the heart of the ruptured Arch-elect node, a potential weapon against the cosmic horror bearing down on them? He turned to Solon. "Doctor, can we use the manifold disruptors to punch a hole through that stormfront? Give Mendez's team a chance to escape?" Solon's eyes widened. "It's possible, but incredibly risky. We'd be firing blind into a maelstrom of warped spacetime. The energy required could destabilize our entire defensive grid." Reeves clenched his fists. The fate of humanity hung in the balance. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the decision that could doom them all or offer a sliver of hope. "Do it," he ordered. "Target Mendez's last known coordinates and fire everything we've got." Solon nodded grimly, her hands flying across the controls. The air thrummed with building energy as Kartak Prime's weapon systems charged to maximum capacity. "Firing in 3, 2, 1... A blinding lance of energy erupted from the station, punching into the roiling chaos of the quantum stormfront. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, with a soundless roar that shook reality itself, a tunnel of stable space-time tore open in the heart of the maelstrom. Through that impossible rift, a single ship emerged, its hull warped and twisted by dimensional stress. It tumbled end over end, trailing streamers of exotic particles. "Tractor beams," Reeves shouted. "Get them inside before that tunnel collapses." The ship was dragged into Kartak Prime's hangar bay seconds before the rift imploded, sending out a fresh wave of space-time distortions. Reeves raced down to meet it, his heart pounding. As the airlock cycled open, Mendez stumbled out. His face was gaunt, eyes haunted by horrors beyond human comprehension. In his arms, he cradled a pulsating mass of alien technology. "Sir," Mendez rasped, his voice raw, "we found it. The key to fighting back." Reeves stared at the writhing construct, feeling a mix of hope and dread. As alarms continued to blare, warning of the approaching doom, he knew their real battle was only just beginning. Reeves' eyes burned from exhaustion, as he stared at the holographic displays surrounding him in Galactic Prime's command center. The subspace-time shear approached with terrifying speed, its quantum distortions already warping the edges of their sensor readings. "All antimatter warheads primed and ready, sir," reported the weapons officer, her voice tight with tension. Reeves nodded, then turned to Dr. Solon. "Doctor, are you certain about this?" Solon's fingers flew across her interface, inputting final calculations. "As certain as one can be when dealing with transdimensional physics, Commander. The inverse manifold waveforms should create the interference patterns we need." Antimatter missiles streaked away from Galactic Prime, their engines leaving brief trails of exotic particles. As they detonated, reality itself seemed to stretch and warp. Where each explosion bloomed, a pinprick of absolute darkness formed. Kugelblitz black holes, each no larger than a subatomic particle. "Manifold geometries radiating as predicted," Solon called out, her eyes fixed on scrolling data streams. "The singularity network is forming." Reeves watched in awe as the Kugelblitz array took shape. Invisible to the naked eye, sensors showed a vast shimmering web of higher dimensional forces stretching out from Galactic Prime. As the subspace-time shear slammed into this barrier, it fractured and diffracted, its destructive energy shunted away from the station's vital areas. For days, then weeks, Galactic's scientists worked without rest. In the primary lab complex, Reeves found Solon slumped over her workstation, dark circles under her eyes. Solon jerked awake, blinking rapidly. "Can't... The singularities are evaporating faster than predicted. We need to recalibrate." Reluctantly, Solon nodded and stumbled off to her quarters. Reeves turned his attention to the view screens, showing Galactic's outer system. The devastation was staggering. Where once thriving colonies had orbited, only roiling quantum foam remained. His stomach clenched as he thought of Mendez and his team, their very atoms scattered to cosmic winds. After 7 grueling cycles, the command center erupted in ragged cheers as the last echoes of the subspace-time shear dissipated into the void. Reeves allowed himself a moment of relief before issuing new orders. "I want a full damage assessment and survivor count," he barked. "Solon, get those sensor drones out there mapping the spatial distortions." Hours later, Reeves stood in one of Galactic's deepest shelters, staring at a familiar face. Mirena Mendez, her father's purpose evident in the set of her jaw, snapped to attention. "Commander Reeves," she said, her voice steady despite the loss she must be feeling. "Reporting for duty, sir." Together they began the monumental task of rebuilding. Reclamator drones swarmed through the wreckage, salvaging what they could from the quantum devastation. In the command citadel, Reeves pored over the sensor data, a growing sense of dread building in his gut. "Her message," Solon finished, stepping up beside him. "We've been running the numbers, Commander. This wasn't just collateral damage from a failed invasion. It was a warning." Reeves felt the weight of command settle heavily on his shoulders. He keyed the intercom, his voice echoing through Galactic Prime's surviving sections. "All senior staff and department heads, report to the primary briefing room immediately. We have a situation." As the station's remaining leadership filed in, Reeves steeled himself for the battle ahead. They had survived this onslaught, but he knew with grim certainty that it was only the beginning. The true test, the confrontation with the Archalect's full might, still loomed on the cosmic horizon, and humanity would need every scrap of ingenuity and courage to face it. Reeves stood before the assembled remnants of humanity's forces, his voice echoing through Galactic Prime's central citadel. "We have one shot at this, one chance to turn the tide against an enemy that has pushed us to the brink of extinction." The air crackled with tension as engineers and scientists huddled around holographic displays, their faces etched with exhaustion and grim purpose. Dr. Solon stepped forward, her hands tracing complex geometries in the air as she explained their audacious plan. "We're going to build a weapon unlike anything we've ever attempted," she said, her voice steady despite the enormity of the task ahead. "A hyper-transdimensional manifold lens array that will bend the very fabric of reality to our will." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Reeves saw hope flicker in eyes that had grown accustomed to despair. He nodded to Solon, signaling her to continue. "We'll salvage exotic materials and computronium from the ancient Ringworld ruins," she explained. "With these, we'll construct a quasi-artificial black hole precisely calibrated to amplify the subspatial stresses already present in our system." Reeves stepped in, his voice cutting through the susurrus of whispered conversations. "I'm authorizing immediate strip mining operations on Kartak's planetoids. We need every scrap of resources we can get our hands on." As the briefing concluded, the Citadel erupted into frenzied activity. Reeves watched as teams scrambled to their assigned tasks, the air thick with persistence and nervous energy. Days blurred into weeks as Kartak's hollow moons were transformed into colossal industrial forges. The constant rumble of machinery became a backdrop to their lives, as stupendous quantities of metamaterials and fractal-encoded metamatter injectors poured forth from the repurposed planetoids. Commander Mirena Mendez, her father's legacy burning bright in her eyes, took charge of the monumental construction project. Reeves stood beside her on an observation deck, watching as vast honeycomb scaffoldings took shape, encompassing Kartak's inner orbital radius. "How are the Vanguard units holding up?" Reeves asked, noting the fatigue etched into Mendez's features. She squared her shoulders, her voice clipped and professional. "They're pushing themselves to the limit, sir. But they understand what's at stake. We all do." Reeves nodded, his gaze drawn to the swarms of robotic drones working alongside the elite human units. Together, they assembled the multi-trillion-ton manifold lens segments with agonizing precision. 4 galactic cycles passed in a blur of sleepless nights and ceaseless labor. Finally, the moment of truth arrived. Reeves stood in the control center, surrounded by banks of humming equipment, as the hyperlens array flickered online for its first test. "Initiating preliminary power-up sequence," Dr. Solon called out, her fingers dancing across holographic controls. "Micro-singularity nodes are online and generating the hyperspatial stress tensor web." Reeves held his breath as the primary manifold lens's aperture dilated, focusing the immense energies being channeled through it. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing seemed to happen. "Initial wavefront detected," a technician announced, "but it's only causing microscopic bending of spacetime. Transcalar harmonics are misaligned." Solon's brow furrowed in concentration. "Recalibrating now, this may take some time." Another full cycle passed as they fine-tuned the array's systems. Reeves paced the control center, pausing only to gulp down synthetic stimulants that kept exhaustion at bay. Finally, Solon's triumphant shout cut through the tense silence. "We've achieved phenomenal coherence. The interspatial stresses are concentrating into an ultra-dense manifold beam." Under his watchful eye, Solon's team began the delicate process of imprinting the hyperbeam with encoded antimatter waveforms. The air itself seemed to thrum with potential as they imbued the beam with torsion-based interference matrices extrapolated from hard-won battlefield data. "These invasive geometric logics are our secret weapon," Solon explained, her voice tight with focus. "If our theories are correct, they'll allow the beam to punch through the Godmind's defenses and deliver a fatal blow to its very essence." Reeves nodded grimly. "A hypercosmic biohazard, manifold cancer." After exhaustive simulations, the moment of activation arrived. Reeves gave the order, his voice steady despite the weight of humanity's future resting on this single command. A blinding azure light erupted from the array, so brilliant that even the station's adaptive shielding struggled to contain its radiance. The hyperspike lanced out, refracting off carefully positioned singularity lensing nodes. An expanding, diffracted interference manifold bloomed outward, saturating the entire star system with precise subspacetime deformity wavefronts. Alarms blared as Kartak Prime's quantum shielding strained against the onslaught of fundamental forces being rewritten. Reeves gripped the edge of a console, his fist clenched. "Mendez, status of the artillery silos?" he barked into his comm. Singularity suppressor bursts primed and ready, came the terse reply. Just say the word, sir. For several heart-stopping seconds, they teetered on the edge of catastrophe. Then, miraculously, the pulsed interference beam achieved full harmonic hypersync. Cheers erupted throughout the control center as Solon's team confirmed the array's success. Reeves allowed himself a small smile, knowing that they had just taken a crucial step towards evening the odds in humanity's desperate struggle for survival. Reeves's fingers flew across the command interface, initiating the emergency evacuation protocols. Klaxons blared throughout Kartak Prime as his voice echoed through every remaining comm channel. All personnel, this is Commander Reeves. Initiate immediate evacuation to designated warp points. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill. The Citadel shuddered as another wave of inverse curvature shockwaves battered its weakening shields. Reeves stumbled, catching himself on a nearby console. He locked eyes with Dr. Solon, her face ashen but resolute. "Doctor, I need options," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos erupting around them. Solon's hands danced across holographic projections, complex equations and probability matrices swirling in the air. "We can reconfigure the remaining singularity lances," she said, her words clipped and precise. "Focus their output into a hyper-concentrated strike on the Dreadform's primary nexus point." Reeves nodded, then turned to Commander Mendez. "Mirena, how long can your orbital defenses hold?" Mendez's face hardened as she studied the tactical readouts. 15 minutes, maybe 20 if we overload the barricade cores, she replied. "But, sir, that's suicide for the defense crews." "I know," Reeves said, his voice heavy, "but it's our only shot." He keyed in the command codes, authorizing the audacious attempt. Across Kartak Prime, evacuation ships launched in frenzied waves, their warp drives flaring as they punched through the fabric of space-time. In the orbital defense rings, skeleton crews worked feverishly to recalibrate the singularity lances. The air crackled with ozone as hyperdense energy fields coalesced around the massive weapons. Reeves watched the tactical displays, his heart pounding as the Godmind's biomechanical swarms advanced relentlessly. The Dreadform's eldritch form loomed ever larger, its presence warping the very structure of reality around it. "Singularity strike package primed," Solon called out, her voice tight with tension. "Firing solution locked." Reeves took a deep breath, steadying himself for what might be humanity's final stand. "All remaining ships clear of the blast radius?" he asked. Mendez nodded, her eyes never leaving the tactical readouts. "Last transport jumping to warp yacht now." "Then let's end this," Reeves said, his voice filled with grim purpose. "Fire." The singularity lances erupted in unison, their combined output focused into a needle-thin beam of unimaginable power. It lanced across space, boring into the heart of the Godmind's Dreadform. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, with a silent scream that shook the very foundations of reality, the Dreadform began to implode. Its hyper-dense structure collapsed in on itself, dragging swaths of space-time into a maelstrom of cosmic destruction. Reeves watched in awe and terror as the Godmind's primary nexus point twisted and contorted, consumed by the very forces it had sought to control. The biomechanical swarms surrounding it flailed wildly, their controlling intelligence suddenly severed. "It's working," Solon exclaimed, her eyes wide as she analyzed the incoming data. "The Dreadform's manifold integrity is collapsing." But even as hope surged through the command center, alarms blared with renewed urgency. Mendez's face paled as she studied her readouts. "Sir," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "the singularity collapse is expanding. At this rate, it'll consume the entire system within minutes." Reeves felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders once more. He keyed in the final evacuation codes, knowing that their victory might come at the cost of their own lives. "All remaining personnel, prepare for emergency warp jump," he ordered, his voice steady despite the growing maelstrom outside. "We've struck a blow for humanity today. Let's make sure someone's left to tell the tale." As the Citadel's emergency warp drive spooled up, Reeves cast one last look at the tactical displays. The Godmind's dread form continued to implode, taking vast swaths of its armada with it. But the hunger of the newly born singularity showed no signs of abating. With a final prayer to whatever powers might be listening, Reeves initiated the warp jump. Kartak Prime vanished in a flash of actinic light, leaving behind a system in the throes of cosmic annihilation. The antimatter sphere tore through the fabric of reality, its hull groaning under the strain of forces beyond human comprehension. Inside the cockpit, Reeves gripped the controls with white-knuckled intensity, his eyes fixed on the swirling vortex of energy ahead. "Mendez, do you copy?" he barked into the comm, static crackling through the channel. "We're approaching the Singularity Nexus." Commander Mendez's voice came through, distorted and faint. "Reading you, sir. Uploading final targeting data now." Reeves felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead as he processed the information flooding his neural interface. The Archilect dread form loomed before them, a vast, unknowable presence that defied description. Its outer manifold shielding shimmered and pulsed, a barrier of pure energy that seemed to warp the very fabric of space-time around it. "Initiating Klein tunnel dive," Reeves announced, his voice steady despite the terror clawing at his insides. "Brace for impact." The antimatter sphere plunged forward, its retrofitted warp drive screaming as they tore open a subspace-time fissure. Reality itself seemed to bend and twist around them, the cockpit filled with blinding light as they breached the dreadform's outer defenses. In an instant that felt like an eternity, they emerged inside the Archilect's singularity cortex. Reeves's mind reeled as he tried to process the impossible geometries surrounding them. Debris from destroyed ships flickered in and out of existence, trapped in a maelstrom of conflicting realities. Reeves ignored the warning klaxons blaring throughout the ship, focusing instead on the targeting data from Mendez. He pushed the antimatter sphere to its limits, feeling the hull vibrate as it struggled to maintain cohesion in this impossible space. "There!" he shouted, spotting the pulsing heart of the Singularity Nexus. "Preparing to arm the warhead." With trembling fingers, Reeves entered the final activation sequence. The ship's core, once the stabilizing heart of Kartak Prime, now hummed with destructive potential beyond imagining. The world exploded into light and fury. For a moment that stretched into infinity, Reeves felt the very foundations of reality buckle and strain. The Archilect's singularity writhed, caught in the grip of forces that could reshape the universe itself. But then, impossibly, the moment passed. Reeves watched in horror as the Godmind's quantum matrices regenerated, absorbing and redirecting the antimatter explosion. A tendril of pure thought, visible only as a distortion in space-time, lashed out at the antimatter sphere. Reeves's last conscious thought was of Mendez, still fighting in the skies above Kartak Prime. He opened his mouth to speak, to offer some final words of hope or defiance, but found only silence as the sphere and its crew were drawn inexorably into the ragged maw of the event horizon. Across the vast expanse of space, refugees from 100 worlds watched their instruments in disbelief as the dreadform's power swelled, unleashing a shockwave that distorted the very fabric of reality. On the dying world of Kartak Prime, Commander Mendez stood amidst the chaos of her command center, her face ashen as she processed the magnitude of their failure. "All units, execute emergency translocation," she ordered, her voice hollow. "May whatever gods are left have mercy on our souls." As the last defenders of humanity fled into the depths of space, Mendez caught the fading echoes of Reeves's final transmission. His words, fragmented and distorted, spoke of hope in the face of annihilation, of the unbreakable spirit of humanity. Humanity's indomitable spirit. As the transmission faded into static, Mendez squared her shoulders and faced the chaos engulfing her command center. Alarms blared as reality itself buckled and warped around them. Mendez barked orders, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her insides. "All ships, execute emergency warp jumps now. Scatter Protocol Omega." The remnants of humanity's once proud fleet vanished in flashes of actinic light, barely outpacing the rippling waves of manifold disruption that threatened to tear apart the very fabric of space-time. Mendez's flagship shuddered as its warp drive engaged, hurling them into the vast unknown. Days blurred into weeks as Mendez rallied the survivors, guiding the ragtag fleet through uncharted space. Their sensors detected a remote dwarf galaxy, far from the devastation wrought by the Archelect. Mendez made a fateful decision. "We make our stand here," she announced to her weary crew. "Prepare for long-term fortification." The fleet limped into orbit around twin gas giants. Mendez oversaw a Herculean effort to transform these alien worlds into humanity's last bastions. Vast atmospheric processors churned, converting hydrogen into dense metamaterial shields. The planet's stormy surfaces bristled with hastily constructed starforges and fabrication facilities. Mendez stood on the observation deck of the newly christened Fortress Maverick, watching as civilian arcs were systematically gutted and rebuilt into makeshift warships. Plasma turrets sprouted from their hulls like metal growths, a far cry from their original purpose of preservation and hope. "Status report," Mendez demanded, turning to a second-in-command. "Hailstorm's shields are at 60% capacity," the officer replied, his eyes sunken with exhaustion. "We've got crews working round the clock, but—" A proximity alarm cut him off. Mendez's heart raced as she scanned the readouts. "Unidentified vessels dropping out of warp," she muttered. "Archelect Vanguard." But as the ships drew closer, Mendez's eyes widened in disbelief. These weren't the biomechanical horrors of the God-Mind. They were human vessels, battered, barely holding together, but unmistakably of Terran origin. "Open a channel," Mendez ordered, her voice thick with emotion. The comm crackled to life, and a familiar voice filled the command center. "This is Joseph Webb requesting emergency docking clearance. We don't have much time." Hours later, Mendez sat across from Webb in a hastily convened war room. The man looked haggard, his face gaunt from years of hardship, but his eyes burned with a fierce grit. "We have a chance," Webb said, his voice low and urgent. "Dr. Solon and his team, they've been working on something, a way to hit the Archelect where it hurts." Mendez leaned forward, her attention razor-sharp. "I'm listening." Webb laid out the plan, a desperate, audacious scheme to strike at the very heart of the God-Mind's power. As he spoke, Mendez felt a familiar fire rekindling in her chest. It was hope, fragile but undeniable. "We'll need every ship, every resource we can muster," Webb concluded, "and even then our odds are slim." Mendez stood, her decision already made. "Then we'd better get to work. The universe isn't going to save itself." As alarms sounded throughout Maverick and Hailstorm, signaling the start of their most ambitious undertaking yet, Mendez caught Webb's eye. No words were needed. They both understood the stakes. Either they succeeded in this final, all-or-nothing gambit, or reality itself would unravel, taking with it the last vestiges of humanity and everything they had ever known. The command center of Fortress Maverick shuddered as another wave of gravitational distortions washed over the manifold frozen bubble. Commander Mendez gripped the edge of the tactical display, her nucleus tightening as she watched the Archelect Singularity Nexus throb with malevolent energy. "Status report," she barked, her eyes never leaving the pulsing horror on the screen. A junior officer's voice crackled over the comm. "Reality anchors holding at 87% efficiency, Commander. Dr. Solon reports the hypersphere perimeter is stable, but—" The rest of his words were drowned out by a deafening screech of tearing metal. Sparks erupted from a nearby console as the very fabric of space-time buckled under the God-Mind's assault. Mendez steadied herself against the command chair. "Webb, do you copy? The Archelect's initiating some kind of doomsday protocol. We need to evacuate now." Joseph Webb's face flickered to life on the main view screen, his features etched with exhaustion and stubborn persistence. "Negative, Commander. We can't abandon our position. If that thing detonates, it'll take half the galaxy with it." He tapped furiously at an unseen console. I'm rerouting power to the slipstream drives. We've got one last shot at this. Mendez watched as Webb's remaining ships darted through the chaos, their hulls glowing with exotic energies as they unleashed volley after volley of modulated antimatter disruptors. Each impact sent ripples of destruction cascading across the Arc-Elect's hyper-manifold. It's not enough, Mendez muttered, her eyes fixed on the readouts. The Singularity Nexus is still building power. We need... Her words were cut short as a blinding flash of light erupted from the heart of the God-Mind. For a moment, all of reality seemed to hold its breath. Fortress Maverick bucked violently as the subspace-time collapse washed over it. Mendez was thrown to the floor, her ears ringing with the screams of twisting metal and shattering reality. Through the haze of pain and disorientation, she heard Webb's voice, distorted and barely audible over the comm. With trembling fingers, she dragged herself to the emergency controls. The evacuation protocol glowed an angry red, warning of catastrophic consequences. Mendez hesitated for a fraction of a second, her mind racing through the implications. Then, with a silent prayer to whatever forces might be listening, she slammed her palm down on the activation panel. The universe itself seemed to scream as the emergency wormholes tore open, their maws gaping wide to swallow Maverick and Hailstorm whole. As the fortresses plunged into the swirling vortex, Mendez caught one last glimpse of the Arc-Elect Singularity Nexus. The universe unraveled around them. Reality itself buckled and tore as the Arc-Elect Singularity Nexus pulsed with malevolent energy. Joseph Webb watched in horror as the fruits of their labor twisted into a nightmare beyond imagination. "Solon!" Webb shouted into his comm, his voice raw with desperation. "Purge the manifold stabilization lattices now. Disengage reality freeze on both fortresses." Dr. Solon's holographic form flickered to life, his eyes wide with panic. "But, sir, that'll leave us exposed to—" As Solon's fingers flew across unseen controls, Webb felt the protective cocoon of warped space-time around Maverick and Hailstorm begin to dissolve. The stars outside shifted, no longer held at bay by their artificial bubble of frozen reality. On Hailstorm's bridge, Commander Mendez gripped her command chair as alarms blared. "All batteries, focus fire on the Arc-Elect Nexus, every antimatter payload we've got." The fortress shuddered as its weapons unleashed a relentless barrage. Streams of concentrated antimatter lanced through space, striking the pulsing heart of the God-Mind. For a moment, hope flared in Mendez's chest. Then the Arc-Elect struck back. A wave of impossible light erupted from the Nexus, reality itself seeming to scream as it tore through space. Mendez watched in awe and terror as Hailstorm's weakened shields warped the blast just enough to avoid a direct hit. The near miss was catastrophic. Hailstorm's protective atmosphere vented explosively into space, a shimmering aurora of escaping gases painting the void. Mendez felt the deck lurch beneath her feet as the fortress began to spin wildly. Through the chaos, she saw Webb's face appear on a flickering viewscreen. "Mendez, we're initiating full evac on Maverick. Can you hold them off?" Mendez nodded grimly, already formulating a plan. "We'll buy you time. Go." As Webb's image vanished, Mendez turned to her weapons officer. "Prep all remaining antimatter warheads for Deadman detonation. If we go down, we're taking those bastards with us." Outside, the void erupted in a furious light show as human interceptors clashed with swarms of Arc-Elect drones. Antimatter turbolasers carved bright lines across space, while civilian transports flickered in and out of reality, desperately running the gauntlet to safety. Hours passed in a blur of ordered chaos. Mendez's voice grew hoarse from shouting commands, her eyes stinging with sweat and unshed tears. They were buying time with blood and lives, each second paid for in human sacrifice. At last, Webb's voice crackled over the comm once more. "Mendez, we're initiating the transdimensional shunt. It's now or never." Mendez took a deep breath, looking around at her battered bridge crew. "It's been an honor," she said softly. Then, her voice strong and clear, "Detonate all warheads for humanity." As Hailstorm erupted in a spectacular fusion of matter and antimatter, The last human vessels, winked out of existence, carried to safety on the quantum waves of Dr. Solon's audacious attempt. In the aftermath, Joseph Webb stood on the observation deck of their makeshift ark, staring out at an unfamiliar starfield. Dr. Solon approached, his face grim. "We've stabilized in a pocket of null space," Solon reported, "but our actions have consequences." Webb turned, dread settling in his stomach. What kind of consequences? Solon's holographic display showed a universe in turmoil. The manifold matrix is unraveling. Reality itself is coming apart at the seams. We have decades at most before total multiversal collapse. Webb's mind raced, considering their options. In the distance, he could already see the first tendrils of the Archilect's warp signature probing the void. "Calculate a multidimensional slingshot," Webb ordered, his voice steady despite the weight of his words. "We're abandoning this reality. It's time to find humanity a new home." The void stretched before them, a canvas of untouched stars and swirling nebulae. Joseph Webb stood at the helm of the command ship, his eyes fixed on the holographic display that filled the bridge. The remnants of humanity's fleet hung suspended in space, a fragile collection of vessels against the vast emptiness. "Dr. Solon, status report," Webb called out, his voice cutting through the tense silence. Solon's fingers danced across his console, streams of data flooding his screens. "Dimensional transition complete, sir. All ships accounted for. Quantum shielding holding steady at 87% efficiency." Webb nodded, allowing himself a small breath of relief. They had made it. But at what cost? He turned to Commander Mendez, who stood rigidly at her station, dark circles under her eyes, betraying the toll of their desperate escape. "Commander, begin long-range scans. I want to know everything about this new cosmos." Mendez's hands flew over her controls, activating the fleet's array of sensors. "Initiating deep space survey. Preliminary results incoming." The main view screen flickered to life, displaying a three-dimensional map of their surroundings. As data streamed in, strange anomalies began to appear, swirling vortexes of energy, pockets of warped space-time, and structures that defied conventional physics. "What in God's name are those?" Webb muttered, leaning in for a closer look. Solon approached, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Artificially sustained continuum disruptions, sir. They appear to be spread across millions of light-years." Webb's mind raced with possibilities. Could they be weapons? Traps left behind by whatever created the Archelect? "Impossible to say without further study," Solon replied, "but their very existence suggests an advanced civilization once operated in this realm." As they spoke, a junior officer called out from her station. "Sir, I'm detecting an energy signature, unlike anything we've encountered before. It's massive." Webb spun to face her. "Location?" "Approximately 2.3 light-years from our current position. The signature appears to be emanating from what looks like a derelict space station." Heart pounding, Webb turned back to Mendez and Solon. "This could be exactly what we need. Ancient technology, perhaps even weapons capable of fighting the Archelect." Mendez nodded grimly. "Or it could be a trap waiting to spring. We can't afford to be reckless." "Agreed," Webb said. "But we also can't afford to waste time. Solon, I want a detailed analysis of that energy signature. Mendez, prepare a scouting party. We move on that station immediately." As the bridge erupted into a flurry of activity, Webb stared out at the alien stars. Somewhere out there he knew the Archelect was coming. Their reprieve was temporary at best. "Hold fast," he whispered to himself, and to the countless souls depending on him. "We're not done fighting yet." The fleet began to move, propulsion systems flaring to life as they set course for the mysterious station. With each passing moment, the bizarre anomalies of this new universe loomed larger, a constant reminder of the strange and perilous path that lay ahead. The alien stars stretched before them, a canvas of untouched possibilities. Joseph Webb stood on the bridge of the command ship, his eyes fixed on the holographic display that filled the space before him. Scout ships darted across the projection, their trajectories mapping out the surrounding systems in a web of glowing lines. "Report," Webb called out, his voice cutting through the low hum of the bridge. A young navigator looked up from her console. "Sir, we've identified a promising system. Yellow dwarf star, multiple terrestrial planets, and a resource-rich asteroid belt." Webb nodded, a flicker of hope igniting in his chest. "Excellent. Commander Mendez, prepare landing teams. We need to secure footholds immediately." Mendez's fingers flew across her tactical display. "Already on it, sir. I've designated 2 primary targets. We're calling them New Haven and Sanctuary." As the fleet mobilized, Webb turned his attention to Dr. Solon. The scientist's holographic form flickered to life beside him, data streams scrolling across his spectral body. "Doctor, what have you found in those anomalies?" Solon's eyes gleamed with excitement. "It's fascinating, Joseph. These aren't natural phenomena. They're scars left behind by an ancient civilization. We've uncovered data caches, technological artifacts. It's a goldmine of information." Webb leaned in, intrigued. "Can we use any of it?" Webb's mind raced with the implications. "Get that data to our engineers immediately. We need to fortify our position here." Months passed in a blur of feverish activity. Webb stood atop a ridge on New Haven, watching as prefabricated structures rose from the rocky valleys below. In the distance, a massive asteroid hung in the sky, their new command citadel, its surface jam-packed with quantum-locked shielding. Commander Mendez approached, her boots crunching on the alien soil. "The outposts are secure, sir, but we need to talk about our defensive capabilities." Webb turned to face her, noting the tension in her stance. "What do you propose?" Mendez took a deep breath. "We should resurrect Project Grendel, the Alpha spawn drones. With Solon's team in control, we can avoid the mistakes of the past." Webb's heart made. The ethical implications made his stomach churn, but he couldn't deny the strategic advantage. After a long moment, he nodded. "Do it, but keep it contained within the Citadel." Deep within the asteroid's shielded interior, Webb watched as the first batch of Alpha spawn warriors took form. Biomechanical bodies floated in translucent pods, their neural matrices pulsing with artificial life. Webb nodded, unable to shake his unease. "Let's hope we never need to use them." Years passed. New Haven flourished, its population swelling as more refugee ships arrived through carefully guarded slipstream corridors. Industrial complexes and antimatter refineries sprawled across the landscape, fueling their militarization efforts. Through it all, Webb remained vigilant. Each day he pored over sensor data, searching for any sign that the Archelect had followed them to this virgin universe. The alarm came on an otherwise unremarkable morning. Webb burst onto the Citadel's command deck, his heart pounding. "Report!" The technician looked up, fear evident in his eyes. "Long-range sensors have detected gravitational anomalies at the system's edge, sir. The waveforms match those preceding a manifold rupture." Webb's blood ran cold. He turned to face the main view screen, watching as the fabric of reality began to warp and tear at the fringes of their new home. "Sound general quarters," he ordered, his voice steady despite the dread settling in his gut. "All ships to battle stations. This is not a drill." As klaxons blared throughout the Citadel and across New Haven's surface, Webb stared into the void. The Archelect had found them. The real test of humanity's survival was about to begin. The command center of the asteroid Citadel shook violently as Webb fired the experimental ordnance. Displays flickered, casting eerie shadows across the faces of the tense crew. Webb gripped the edge of the tactical console, his fist clenched as he watched the salvo streak across space. "Impact in 3, 2, 1, called out the weapons officer. A blinding flash erupted from the heart of the lead Leviathan. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then reality itself appeared to fracture around the massive entity. Cracks in space-time spider-webbed outward from the impact point, warping and twisting the very fabric of existence. The Leviathan's form began to distort, stretching and compressing in impossible ways. Its eldritch geometries, once so precise and alien, now collapsed in on themselves. The creature's unearthly shriek reverberated through subspace, causing comm systems throughout the human fleet to overload in bursts of static. "My God," Dr. Solon breathed, his holographic form flickering as he analyzed the incoming data. "The anti-manifold ordnance is unraveling its dimensional coherence. It's being shunted out of our reality." Webb watched in awe as the massive Leviathan seemed to fold in on itself, collapsing into a singularity before vanishing entirely. The surrounding space rippled like disturbed water, sending shock waves through the nearby Archilect forces. "All ships concentrate fire on the disruption zones," Webb barked into the fleet-wide channel. "Hit them while they're disoriented." The human vessels surged forward, capitalizing on the moment of chaos. Antimatter torpedoes and quantum lances lashed out, tearing through the destabilized Archilect swarms. Explosions bloomed silently in the void, as scores of enemy craft were obliterated. But the reprieve was short-lived. The remaining Leviathans, seemingly learning from their fallen comrade, began to emit strange, pulsating fields that seemed to stabilize the local space-time around them. "Sir," called out a sensor officer, her voice tight with tension, "the enemy is adapting. They're reinforcing their dimensional anchors. Our anti-manifold weapons are losing effectiveness." Webb's mind raced, searching for options. He opened a secure channel to Commander Mendez. "Morena, we need to fall back to Sanctuary. The Citadel's shields won't hold against a coordinated assault from those Leviathans." Mendez's face appeared on the main view screen, her expression grim but determined. "Understood. I've already begun evacuating non-essential personnel to the deep bunkers. We'll hold the line here as long as we can." As Webb coordinated the retreat, Dr. Solon approached, his holographic eyes wide with an idea. "Joseph, I think I know how we can buy more time. If we overload the Citadel's quantum shielding and then detonate it, we might be able to create a temporary null space bubble. It won't last long, but it could give our forces a chance to regroup on Sanctuary." As klaxons blared throughout the asteroid fortress, Webb took one last look at the tactical display. The Archilect forces were regrouping, preparing for another push. He knew that this was just the beginning of a war that would determine the fate of humanity in this new universe. "All hands," he announced, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "Abandon the Citadel. May whatever gods are left in this reality watch over us all." With that, Webb joined the stream of personnel rushing to the evacuation ships, leaving behind the only home humanity had known in this strange new cosmos. As the last vessels cleared the hangar bays, the Citadel's quantum shielding began to pulse with increasing intensity, preparing for its final desperate act. Webb's consciousness flickered in the twilight realm, his thoughts racing as he coordinated with Solon. The Singularity's interior pulsed with ethereal energies, warping and twisting the very fabric of reality around them. "Solon, status on the protogenic manifold projection?" Webb's voice echoed strangely in the non-space. Solon's form shimmered, data streams cascading across his spectral body. "Calculations complete, Joseph, but the risks are catastrophic. We could annihilate everything we've fought to protect." As Solon began the intricate process, Webb felt his consciousness stretching, fragmenting across countless quantum states. Each iteration of himself experienced a different potential outcome, a dizzying array of possibilities cascading through his mind. In one state, he saw the Archilect's vast computational networks crumbling, consumed by the viral collapse vector. In another, he watched helplessly as human refugee ships twisted and imploded, contaminated by the very weapon meant to save them. The singularity bubble trembled, its boundaries fluctuating wildly. Webb's perceptions splintered further, his sense of self fracturing across dimensions. "Joseph!" Solon's voice cut through the chaos. "The manifold curvature is destabilizing. We're running out of time." Webb focused, pulling the fragments of his consciousness back together through sheer force of will. He visualized the protogenic projection, willing it into existence with every fiber of his being. Reality itself seemed to scream as the projection burst forth from the singularity bubble. Webb felt his essence unraveling, spreading outward in a wave of quantum information. The archaelect construct surrounding them shuddered, their biomechanical forms writhing as the viral vector took hold. Cascading failures rippled through their systems, propagating outward at impossible speeds. But even as victory seemed within reach, Webb sensed a terrible price. The projection was indiscriminate, infecting everything it touched. He caught glimpses of human ships twisting in agony, their crews trapped in nightmarish dimensional flux. "No!" Webb cried out, but his voice was lost in the cacophony of unraveling realities. The singularity bubble collapsed entirely, hurling Webb and Solon's patterns into the maelstrom. As his consciousness scattered across the cosmic winds, Webb's last coherent thought was a desperate prayer for forgiveness. In the physical universe, the effects of their gambit spread like wildfire. Entire star systems blinked out of existence as the fabric of space-time unraveled. The archaelect's vast network of constructs crumbled, consumed by the very chaos they had sought to harness. But amidst the devastation, pockets of stability remained. In distant corners of the cosmos, human refugee ships huddled in the shadows of dying stars, their crews watching in horror as reality itself seemed to come undone around them. As the wave of destruction swept outward, consuming everything in its path, the survivors faced an uncertain future, in a universe forever changed by humanity's desperate last stand. The protogenic singularity pulsed with blinding intensity as Webb felt his consciousness stretch and warp. In an instant, the twilight realm shattered around him, his entire being compressed into a single point, then exploded outward in a violent burst of information. Webb's essence raced through subspace, infiltrating the vast network of archaelect constructs. He felt himself fragment, each shard of his consciousness worming its way into the alien computational matrices. The sensation was excruciating, like being torn apart and reassembled 1,000,000 times per second. Across the battlefield, archaelect vessels began to convulse. A massive leviathan, its hull gleaming with otherworldly alloys, suddenly buckled. Fractures spread across its surface as internal systems went haywire. The ship's quantum singularity cannon misfired, creating a localized implosion that tore the craft apart from within. Nearby, a swarm of hunter-killer drones abruptly lost cohesion. Their intricate formations dissolved into chaos as the viral code corrupted their higher functions. Exotic particles spewed from their disintegrating forms, painting eerie trails across the void. On the bridge of the human flagship, Commander Mendez watched in awe as the enemy forces crumbled. "What in God's name is happening out there?" she demanded. A sensor officer's voice cracked with disbelief. "Ma'am, it's Webb. Somehow he's become a weapon. He's tearing the archaelect fleet apart from the inside out." Mendez's eyes widened as she processed the implications. She keyed the fleet-wide comm channel. "All ships, this is our chance. Push through their lines while they're vulnerable." The refugee arc surged forward, weaving between the chaos of disintegrating archaelect vessels. Antimatter torpedoes lanced out, finishing off wounded leviathans as the human fleet fought for survival. Suddenly, a massive shockwave rippled through space-time. An archaelect dreadnought, its insectoid form writhing in dimensional flux, detonated in a hyperspatial conflagration. The blast engulfed hundreds of smaller craft and sent reality itself buckling outward. "Slipstream drives now," Mendez roared as the wave of destruction approached. The human ships phased into the relative safety of subspace mere moments before entire star systems were obliterated in their wake. When they emerged, the battlefield had been transformed. Where once the skies teemed with archaelect swarms, now only frozen husks remained. Mendez dispatched recon teams to investigate, their reports painting a surreal picture. "It's like they're trapped in amber," one pilot reported, his voice filled with wonder. "These things that were trying to kill us, they're just hanging there, suspended in space-time." In the following days, an uneasy quiet settled over the battered human fleet. They regrouped in a distant nebula, hidden from prying sensors, as they licked their wounds. Mendez paced the halls of the command ship, overseeing critical repairs. "How are we looking on those shield generators?" she asked a harried technician. The woman wiped sweat from her brow. "We've got primary systems back online, Commander, but our antimatter reserves are critically low. We won't survive another pitched battle." Mendez nodded grimly. "Keep at it. We need every advantage we can get." Weeks passed in tense silence as humanity clung to its tenuous survival. Scout ships probed the darkness, searching for a new home, while Solon's sensor grid kept vigil for any sign of Arch-elect activity. The calm shattered without warning. Alarms blared throughout the fleet as Solon's holographic form materialized on the command deck, his expression grave. "Commander," the AI's voice wavered with an emotion Mendez had never heard before. "Fear. We have a problem." Solon brought up a galactic display, pointing to a massive distortion that dwarfed anything they'd seen before. "This rupture, it's beyond anything in our models. The Arch-elect is coming, and it's bringing something terrible with it." Mendez stared at the readings, her blood running cold. "Olm?" The ancient manifold array hummed to life, its once dormant structures pulsing with eldritch energies. Solon's holographic form flickered as he interfaced directly with the alien system, streams of incomprehensible data cascading across his spectral body. "Initiating primary sequence," Solon announced, his voice distorted by the quantum fluctuations surrounding him. "Brace for potential space-time distortions." Commander Mendez gripped the edge of the command console, her nucleus tightening. The bridge crew held their breath as reality itself seemed to waver around them. Mendez's eyes widened as she watched the tactical display. Dozens of silver orbs, each jam-packed with exotic weaponry, materialized around the fleet. "All ships, defensive formations. Solon, we need that array operational now." The AI's form convulsed as he grappled with the alien technology. "The system's logics are resistant. I'm attempting to force a reality-sculpting subroutine." Outside, space itself began to ripple and twist. The hunter-killer spheres faltered, their precise formations disrupted by the localized warping of space-time. Several collided, their hulls buckling as they phased partially out of normal space. "It's working," Mendez exclaimed. "Push harder, Solon." The AI complied, pouring more of his processing power into the manifold array. The distortions intensified, creating a kaleidoscopic maelstrom of fractured dimensions around the human fleet. Arch-elect vessels caught in the effect began to dissolve, their structures unable to maintain cohesion in the chaotic geometries. But the victory was short-lived. A massive shockwave erupted from the array, washing over the human ships and overloading their shields. Mendez was thrown to the deck as systems across the fleet went haywire. "Solon, what's happening?" The AI's voice came through garbled and strained. "The array, it's collapsing local spacetime. We've triggered a cascading quantum singularity. I can't control it." Through the viewports, Mendez watched in horror as reality fractured around them. Stars winked out of existence, replaced by swirling vortexes of impossible colors. The very fabric of space began to fray, revealing glimpses of alternate dimensions and nightmare realms beyond human comprehension. As the remnants of humanity's last fleet engaged their warp drives, the manifold array imploded. The resulting hyperspatial shockwave catapulted the ships into the void, hurling them across vast gulfs of space and time. Mendez clung to consciousness as her ship tumbled through realities. The last thing she saw before blacking out was the twisted wreckage of the Arch-elect hunter-killers, their once impervious forms shattered by forces beyond even their creators' understanding. In the silence that followed, the fate of humanity hung in the balance, scattered across dimensions by their bold strategy. The command deck of Mendez's flagship shuddered as Solon initiated the alien manifold array. Reality warped before her eyes, the bridge viewports fracturing into a kaleidoscope of impossible colors and geometries. Mendez gripped her console, her stomach lurching as the laws of physics seemed to unravel around her. "Status report," she barked, fighting to keep her footing as the deck plates rippled beneath her. Her sensor officer, Lieutenant Chen, stared at his display in disbelief. Commander, I can't make sense of these readings. It's as if we're everywhere and nowhere at once. For an eternal instant, the entire refugee convoy hung suspended in a void beyond time and space. Mendez felt her consciousness stretching, fragmenting across countless potential realities. Then, with a violent lurch, the universe snapped back into focus. Alarms blared as the ship's systems went haywire. Mendez watched in horror as the warp shielding flickered and died, leaving them exposed to the raw forces of the twisted space-time continuum. "Solon," she shouted, "what's happening?" The AI's holographic form wavered, its voice distorted. "The arrays, it's not working as intended. I've opened a breach in the fabric of reality itself." Before Mendez could respond, space tore open around them. Silvery spheres poured through the dimensional rifts, Arc-elect hunter-killer drones, their hulls gleaming with alien malevolence. "All ships emergency shunt warp," Mendez ordered, her fingers flying across the tactical display. But as she initiated the sequence, the computer spat back strings of nonsensical data. "Shunt warp's offline," her helmsman reported, panic edging into his voice. "Navigation's completely scrambled." Mendez watched helplessly as human vessels blinked in and out of existence, caught in localized pockets of warped spacetime. An interceptor to her portside phased halfway through an Arc-elect drone, both ships disintegrating in a spray of quantum foam. The void erupted with monstrosities beyond comprehension, hybrids of machine and energy, their forms constantly shifting and writhing. Tendrils of pure mathematical abstraction lashed out, ensnaring Mendez's flagship. She felt the deck lurch beneath her as the ship's hull began to deform. "Weapons," she shouted. "Target those things!" Disruptor lances flashed out, but the beams twisted in mid-flight, looping back on themselves or vanishing into pocket singularities. Nothing they did seemed to have any effect on the Arc-elect constructs. As the command deck dissolved around her, replaced by fractal landscapes of alien geometries, Mendez caught sight of a familiar face. Webb's features, contorted in agony, flickered across the surface of the nearest biomechanical horror. His eyes met hers for a brief instant, and in that moment she understood the full magnitude of their failure. "Joseph," she whispered, reaching out to touch the writhing surface. Her hand passed through, sending ripples of quantum distortion cascading across the creature's form. Around her, the remnants of humanity's last stand crumbled. She watched as entire ships were unmade, their crew's very existence rewritten into the fabric of this new, horrific reality. The artifact they had hoped would be their salvation had instead unleashed something far worse than the Arc-elect they sought to destroy. As the laws of physics continued to unravel, Mendez saw it, the Arc-elect itself, no longer bound by the constraints of normal space and time. Its consciousness coalesced into a singularity of pure information, a godlike intelligence born from the death throes of the universe they once knew. The entity's attention focused on her, the last fragile thread of human defiance. Mendez felt its presence invade her mind, rewriting her thoughts, her memories, her very sense of self. She tried to scream, but there was no sound in this place beyond reality. In her final moments of individual consciousness, Mendez understood the terrible truth. They had not defeated the Arc-elect. They had given it the keys to... If you finished this story, please subscribe and like the video. Then leave a comment that says, "I liked the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.